Hello, Marlins fans. We are back for another edition of FOF Live, presented by LaPop. That's LAPOP. You can find them on Instagram, Twitter, and in their Doral location. As always, we have our panelists here tonight. It is a small one today, but as always, we have Eli Sussman, we have intern Nick. We might have Noah on a weather report live from Boston to see how everything is going there and maybe even preview the series and how everything has going in Fenway. But before we talk about Fenway, before we talk about Jazz and everything there, let's talk about what happened the series prior against the Pittsburgh Pirates. It shows 3, but it was a 4-game series. Miami did take.
I should have double checked that. When I put this together, I was not used to the format.
I thought it was just the last 3.
No, we could. I think this makes more sense though in hindsight because the last one was 5 days ago. Feels so long ago. So I guess we can focus more on the last 3. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and so these last 3 are definitely probably the most important in terms of what we saw from the Marlins. We saw Luzardo 7 innings, Brian Hoying having another fantastic start, including 5 no-hit innings, which we will get into that. And then we have Yuri Perez just becoming the ace of the 2023 Marlins rotation. Nick, I'm going to give you the floor. Your options: Luzardo, Hoying, Yuri Perez. I'm going to give you the choice who to talk about first.
Oh, that's a tough choice because the pitching just in general for all 4 games was absolutely outstanding. There's really no pitcher to just say that guy was better than the other one because all of them are just absolutely outstanding. Yuri looked like he was just an absolute stud out there, and even Skip said after the game it was like he didn't even feel like he had his number 1 stuff going, and then he's still striking 9 guys out and going that deep. But it's just really exciting to see such a young kid at just 20 years old go up there and do everything, especially with all his pitches too. It seems like he doesn't have anything that's really bad in any games. He makes hitters look kind of bad. I know we talked about the Blue Jays series. The Blue Jays are a really good team, and the Pirates also have some good veteran hitters like Santana and McCutchen, where it's to make guys like that not look very good and get 0 runs. It's just really impressive to see from that young of a kid, and it's just kind of unbelievable. You never see it. That's the thing.
Yeah, Eli, the same thing. We can go about Yuri because he's gotten some national attention. We even saw a couple of days ago on Pardon Interruption on ESPN, him getting coverage there talking about Yuri Perez. Just how has Yuri been not say recently, but maybe including the start?
It's almost unprecedented how he is getting better. We're getting close to 2 months of him up here. And June was one of the better pitching months by any starting pitcher in Marlins history. He allowed 1 earned run in the entire month of June while being a staple in this rotation. He's getting better. And it's really not that hard to see. Like the one thing we looked at early on, and maybe we still look at, is that his changeup isn't quite as much of a put away pitch as we thought it was. But one of the other questions I had about him early on was if he was getting enough ground balls. It felt like he was flirting with danger a lot that Seattle start in particular. I remember how vividly he needed a lot of acrobatic catches near the wall to keep him in that game. And what we've seen the last few starts is that his ground ball rate is now higher than it's been before, where he's getting just this perfect blend of soft contact and ground balls and strikeouts. The strikeouts are going up as well as he's going along with this, and he's doing it a variety of different ways. He's doing it with these really precisely located fastballs that's sitting 98, 99. And his breaking balls have been even better than I thought they would be, especially his curveball and the way that is getting chases below the zone. He's such a well-rounded pitcher, and he is. It's saying a lot because the way that Braxton has been throwing recently, including in this series, has been impressive as well. But Perez is the ace of this rotation for the moment. He's the most reliable guy. He's been as consistent as any pitcher could possibly be over the last month plus. And it's not just relative to other super young guys. It makes it all the more incredible that he is doing it at age 20. You could just look at history, and there are just no other rookies that debut like this and put together a string of 9 performances where almost all 9 of them have been flawless in terms of run prevention. He's just been immensely valuable. I think in my opinion, I think he is all-star worthy, even in a small sample, because of how much he is helping this team win games by throwing up zeros and start after start after start. It's been beyond anybody's wildest dreams is what he would look like immediately. And it is one of those other factors where we point to a rise for so much of the season as thinking the Marlins got a 300 hitter and he's hitting 400, and that is getting them a couple more wins than they could have realistically hoped for. And now this is another factor where the team, this is a stage where if he had just been a typical rookie and gone through his growing pains and maybe even pitched poorly enough to go back down, that I think this is a time of the schedule where the team would be slipping a little bit in the standings. And it's yet another thing that is coming up really positive for the team in order to allow them to continue to overachieve. They keep getting these performances of guys being even better than you hope they would be.
Yeah, just everything going great for the Marlins. And we could just backtrack almost on every game here that we have. Let's talk about the one before. It was the walk-off in the 11th hour, the 11th inning with John Birdie. But let's go ahead and talk about the starting pitcher of that game, Brian Hoeing, coming in and another, you could say, I don't want to say opener, but just kind of like a spot start there for Brian Hoeing. He had won, I believe, the prior series, which went really well. And this one was even better than that, including 5 no-hit innings. We were in the press box thinking, are we going to see a Brian Hoeing no-hitter? But it was just really incredible watching that. Nick, Brian Hoeing, just explain. Brian Hoeing, I don't know if you can go in more depth on that.
Well, the thing with Hoeing, where it gets crazy to think about, is how he started the year, where the first couple of times we saw him, it was like, we were excited for him to first come up, and then it was like, oh, that didn't really go phenomenal. His first couple starts, I think it was 1 or 2 he had, a couple. And then he goes to the bullpen, and he really starting to pick up and find his thing. And then we start seeing the numbers on him doing phenomenal in the bullpen. And I was really excited to actually see him get another start now. In the past 2 starts, he's done great. You didn't expect him to give much. It was going into those games, it was, can we get 3-4 innings? And he gave 5 this one, no hit innings, only 2 strikeouts, which it's not been the strikeouts with him, at least in these 2 starts. But he's just been able to get really efficient, get a bunch of guys out, and he's mostly used the sinker. It's been all really the sinker, throwing the slider in there somewhat, but it's really been that sinker to just get people away, and he's not going out there blowing the ball by a bunch of people. It's let the guys hit, let me make my defense make plays for me, and it's worked out. It's worked out beautifully for him, and he's really been a good starter for this team while we have some injuries with guys out, like Rogers been out for a while and Cabrera being out now. It's been a really crucial thing to give them a little extra boost and added energy into the game, and especially being able to go 5 innings, not forcing them to use the whole bullpen so soon.
Yeah. Eli, the same thing there on Brian Hoeing. Maybe you can even get a little more on the batting side, since Rise did have a great game, which that could be said for any game he plays this season. But this would include home run, 2 walks, 2 RBIs. Talk to me a little bit about Arias and Hoeing on that 11th inning walk-off game.
I think, was this the game that I went to the movies? Yeah, I saw, what did I say? I saw Asteroid City, which is pretty good. I'd recommend that. And I came back, I think I came back exactly in the 8th inning when they were winning, and that's when it started to crumble a little bit, and I felt like I jinxed it, and yet they did pull it out in the end. Yeah, with Arise hitting that was third home run, and a couple of those now coming pretty recently, that has been that little element of his game where entering the year where you were dreaming about how he could reach a new level. That was kind of the idea, is that maybe he would hit from more power than ever before. And to this point in the season now, he's kind of at his career norms where it's just a couple home runs sprinkled here and there, but it matters and it adds up. In addition to all the singles they continues to compile at an amazing rate. With Hoeing, yeah, you have to be thrilled with the last couple outings, and yet I'm still a little bit skeptical because he's been doing it mostly with two pitches. He's been mostly just fastball slider, very limited use of the changeup. He was taken out after 5 innings by design, just because he's not fully stretched out yet, and he's done exactly what you wanted him to do in this situation where he was pretty suddenly thrown into the rotation. The question moving forward is going to be if he's able to get that third time through a lineup. And if he's going to be pushed into that situation, he's almost definitely going to need to use that changeup more often than he has been. And that continues to be a big question. So he's given them exactly what you wanted so far. But then moving forward, if he wants to stake his claim for a rotation spot, it's not the craziest thing. The big question is whether or not that changeup is going to play for him and allow him to go to have this type of success in the 6th inning and even in the 7th inning when they need him to.
Yeah. And going from that, just how great Brian Hoeing was. So I guess you do have to give Alex Carver his flowers there on Brian Hoeing. And in the beginning, it did not look well at all with Brian Hoeing. And then we can go even a little bit and look about the end of that game. Started with an Alex Carver guy and it ended with an Alex Carver guy and Andrew Nardi. Andrew Nardi came in and struck out the side. He was, he even came in and had his own press conference too, talking about his outing and what he's changed so far from last season to this one, going 1 inning, 3 Ks. And just look at Andrew Nardi overall, ERA under 2.7, WHIP close to under 1, only walking 8 guys. Eli, on Andrew Nardi, is this a guy that can even we see in the All-Star game at all? Can he even get some, I don't want to say votes, but just some love from Andrew Nardi, because he's really been probably one of the best, if not maybe the best bullpen arm of the Marlins this season?
I think I've made it pretty clear that I think the fantasy of him being in the All-Star game are kind of out the window. Guys like this just don't get that kind of love because of the traditional roles that they're placed in. Yet, they're putting him in situations where he is adding so much value to the team, especially when you go to extra innings and when you're inheriting runners. This inning really did jump out at me as one of my favorites for him this year, going up against all right-handers. And in a year where if you could poke one hole in his game, he has been a little bit more vulnerable to righties than to lefties. And yet he was so in control here, showing some rare emotion at the very end. It's the high fastball has been the most important aspect for him this year, getting those chases at the top of the zone. And then to see that slider to end things off, perfectly placed down and in. This is what it looks like. This is what a traditional high leverage swing and miss consistent reliever looks like. And he continues to be, for the most part this season, just exactly what they envisioned when he was dominating in the upper minors. I would also just point out that the main value that he adds is what he does with inherited runners on base. When we talk like somebody about Sandy, and his main problem this year, it seems to be that things go to hell when there are runners on base. Nardi is totally unfazed by it. And he's coming in so many of these situations, inheriting runners for other guys. That doesn't even show up in his ERA. That just shows up in suppressing the ERA of his teammates because he strands their runners so consistently. For him to have that intangible part of him, you usually don't look at relievers and think long-term and building around them and keeping them around for a while. But with Nardi, this is somebody that I could see having success for the foreseeable future. And he's a guy, he's on the league minimum. He has a bunch of years of control remaining. The Marlins haven't produced many guys like this in the bullpen. They've produced so many starters that have had good success either in Miami or elsewhere. But there haven't been that many of these relievers come up drafted and developed from their system and pitch the way that Nardi has. So just appreciate this while you have it, because there are not a ton of guys like this who settle into this rhythm so early in their career.
My favorite part about this outing that was the other day, where in that game, it was the game before on Thursday, it was he gave up the hit and then the home run. It just seemed like it was, oh no, we're out of this game now because they were down 4-1, and then Garrett Cooper obviously did the whole thing. But it was to see him bounce back and say, oh yeah, I gave I put the game almost out of reach. Then we came back and said, my boys got me behind me, and now I'm going to go out there and strike out the side and go let us walk it off in the bottom of the 11th. And that was just really cool to see.
Yeah. We can go with Devin here. Do you think this kind of tracks for Andrew Nardi in terms of being a potential closer? I know with AJ Puck, but as maybe the de facto closer now for the Marlins, sharing with Dylan Flora, but maybe you mentioned long term. Is this something that the Marlins maybe have a good problem having maybe 1, 2, 3 closers on the roster?
Well, I think we've seen that the way they've used him is the second in command at this point behind Puck. When Puck is unavailable to close games, Nardi is the one put in that position. So yeah, the short answer is yeah, he is that same type of player as Puck. They've a lot of the same elements. The breaking ball is a little bit different, and in fact, Nardi's fastball is getting more whiffs than even Puck's is so far this year. So that element is so hard to trace down. Guys that can command their fastballs and get swings and misses against them, and usually aren't that vulnerable to home runs. There have been with Nardi now a couple of recent examples, but overall, he is just a really well-rounded reliever, and that is going to be a very good problem to have as this season goes on.
Yeah, and maybe another good problem the Marlins are currently having is Braxton Garrett. And then you look at that game, the one that wasn't there between the three games. The first one going 7 innings and 13 strikeouts, 13 Ks. I believe a career high for Braxton Garrett there against the Pittsburgh Pirates. And we mentioned All-Star for Andrew Nardi. I think this guy, Braxton Garrett, really deserves some All-Star, you could say votes, credit, speculation, thoughts, whatever. He deserves at least being thought to be in the All-Star game, just the way he's performed. And, we look at the stats, and you can always say take out the Atlanta Braves game, the 15-run, whatever. But even with that, it's still really great numbers from Braxton Garrett. And it'll be even lower if you do take out that Braves game. Nick, what have you seen from Braxton Garrett, and is this guy an all-star?
See, I think the one hard thing is being in Miami, you don't get those huge votes from like the New York teams and stuff. But I 100% think he's should be worthy of an all-star, especially coming off this 13 strikeout appearance. I was there watching it. I was in the press box for that game, and it was just awesome to see how good he was doing, how exciting it was for him to go out there. And he talked about it after the game, just how everything was just going for him, and how the slider and the sinker were working off each other, and then how the cutter would work in there just to get first strikes and everything and just get going against hitters and get strikes. Because Braxton, we don't see him usually. This year, he's had a couple instances with that. We don't usually see him rack up 8-9 strikeouts. You don't expect that right away from Braxton. But seeing him go out there and throw 13 strikeouts, it was just kind of not surprising, but awesome to see and surprising. I really think he has a good shot to be an all-star, and I really would love to see him there. It'd be really cool to see.
Yeah, same question to you, Eli. On Braxton Garrett, maybe all-star, and maybe do we have numbers on what his ERA is outside of that 25 earned run game?
Well, what I would say is that I really wish that things lined up in a way so he could get his revenge against the Braves this weekend. He's pitching tomorrow on Wednesday, which means that he's just going to miss the Braves series. Instead, he's going to pitch when they come back to Miami right after that. That would, if he was going to make a last-minute push for the All-Star game, that would kind of be one of the pegs in it, is getting revenge against the one team that really put a big number on him. If you take out that game, it's an ERA right around 2.5 for going on close to half a season in a year where offense is up around the league. I mean, that means I think people need to process that run scoring has been up around the league. And so that number for a starting pitcher, that would be one of the best qualified numbers in all of baseball for a starter at this point in the year. He's been that consistently good. The strikeouts have come since that adjustment with his cutter, not just the cutter itself, but the way that his other pitches are playing off of that. He's got such a deep bag that he pitches with, probably just as much as any other player in this Marlins rotation, if not a deeper bag of pitches than all of them. And it gets him just a wide variety. It's not about overpowering guys. It's not all about the whiffs, but sometimes it's the way that he's sequencing these pitches, the way that he is like setting up with his cutter in order to finish guys off with one of the other pitches in his arsenal because it's breaking the opposite direction. It's such a well-rounded pitch mix. I think this is it's an interesting spot because I do think this is the best version of himself. I have a hard time seeing him getting even better than this moving forward. I think this is kind of a realistic best case scenario for Braxton Garrett. He's been immensely valuable so far. It'll be a big question to see exactly how things progress as this year goes on. He is on pace to pitch, by far the most innings that he ever has before. He's still a relatively young pitcher, a guy that missed time due to injuries throughout his minor league career as well. So no, we're not that far away from him pushing up against uncharted territory in terms of his workload. So I will be fascinating to see how he battles with that. He's a guy that you can point to the fact that he doesn't rely on velocity, but velocity matters for everybody. And so if we get deeper into the year and fatigue is weighing on him and that fastball is like mid and upper 80s instead of low 90s at times, that's what's going to make him vulnerable. That's where the strikeouts are going to go away, is if he's never able to pull deep and overpower somebody and get a fastball by somebody. That's when he could be vulnerable as a soft tosser. So he's going to be one of the most important, the X factor for this entire Marlins pitching staff moving forward, because they've been relying on him more than you thought they would. And as good as he's been, you don't really have a clear idea of what to expect for the second half of the season.
Yeah, and that may be a good problem to have there with Braxton. I think maybe the other question would be, I think it's just something to think about. Maybe the Marlins are thinking about it. I hope maybe not really. Maybe the trade deadline. You look at a guy like Brax, just, you mentioned it can be sometimes a little volatile. You look at the way he's pitching this season. They can always throw to teams, hey, take out his Braves. He's ERA under 2.5. But for the Marlins, that they do want to keep winning, they do want to hopefully make the playoffs. But is Braxton Garrett either considered a guy that the Marlins could trade, and maybe a team wants to buy on them? Maybe the Marlins just want to think they can get something better pitching-wise if trading Brax. Is that even an option at all? Do you think the Marlins are maybe even considering that?
I think they're not remotely considering it unless they get that's something that would probably go all the way to the deadline and hinge on either Hoeing continuing to shove and probably Johnny Cueto turning into Johnny Cueto again. That's coming up pretty quickly, and they're going to get we'll see. They'll have a pretty decent runway between now and the trade deadline to evaluate those two guys in particular. It's going to just hinge on, they would not even remotely consider it unless they feel like they have other options that can get them through the next couple of months, because they are in this very privileged position where you start wondering, hey, Braxton's an amazing regular season pitcher. Is he going to be somebody that we want to use in the postseason? Is he a postseason starter? There is that dividing line between a major league starter and somebody that once you get to the postseason is like a definitive top 3 in your group. And that's such a first world problem to have that they'll begin to look more closely to as we get closer to the deadline. But I'd be really surprised. I just did want to point out, as I said before, that his value is probably never going to be higher than it is right now for somebody that still has another 4 years of club control beyond this year. And for someone whose salary is so low, every single team could use somebody like Braxton.
Yeah. And speaking of the trade deadline, obviously a target for the Marlins is the catching position. But as of late, one Marlins catcher has been hitting it like his name is Mike Piazza or Johnny Bench, and that is Jacob Stallings, including a 3-hit game in that 11th inning game versus the Pirates. Nick, Jacob Stallings, I believe, in the last 5 games is hitting maybe, I believe, is it 300, Eli? Is it even 400, I think? I don't even know. I know it's a high number. Oh, wait, you're muted. Let's
see. Last 5 games, I have him at 357.
Oh my God! He's catcher Luis Arias as of late, and Arias with more home runs also. Nick, to me about Jacob Stallings, maybe those last 5 games, and are those games indicative on what we can expect from Jacob Stallings, or is those just an anomaly?
I wouldn't say they're a complete anomaly, but I don't think we can even near expect that kind of production going forward. I think we all know that his hitting is definitely a problem, that it's not going to get magically fixed overnight, and I don't think it will ever be fixed, but I think he's a very strong catcher behind the plate, and I think that's what is more important than his hitting. I think catcher's one of the rare positions where it's, hey, your defense can matter a lot more than your offense.
Mhm.
So I don't think he's going to keep this up nearly at all. I think maybe he can go on a little hot streak and it'd be really fun to say, hey, Jacob Stallings was the guy that led us to 2-3 wins. I think that no one expected that really, but that'd be really fun to see. But I don't think he can keep up this production. I think it'd be fun too. I think it'd be exciting, but I think we just know his hitting and how it's been the rest of this year, where I don't think you can expect 3-hit games coming out left and right.
Yeah. And you look at those games, probably the biggest numbers that really stand out is there's no home runs, there's no RBIs, there's no doubles, and you definitely are getting triples there. Eli, is that really showing kind of like what Jacob Stallings is? Just guy who maybe gets lucky hits, lucky contact, and it's really just maybe bloop singles all across the field. It's not going to really get you doubles, no home runs, and he's really not going to drive in anything.
He's such a limited offensive player because he doesn't hit the ball hard, and also he's so slow. He's so slow. Like, you can't even put into words. Jacob Snailings, how slow he is.
I believe he has one speed on MLB The Show, and that might be pushing it.
So the issue when you tie that together, if there's no extra base hits, and you can't run, and when the best case scenario is you're on first base, there's just not much that value that adds, because the next guy either has to hit the ball out of the ballpark in order to score you. You're not going to advance under like any other circumstances, not taking extra bases, where a lot of those singles are just empty singles because of that lack of speed, that total absence of base running ability that he has. And to this point in the season, we're really deep in. He's still slugging 243. If he was hitting 243 like he did through a lot of his Pirates years, that's the guy that they wanted. But when you're slugging at that level, when there's just no extra base element to it whatsoever, and you're running slower than ever, it makes him, even relative to other catchers, is a pretty big liability over there. It has gotten a tiny bit better than it was earlier this year. And it's a complicated situation. You just don't see a whole lot of catchers move during the middle of the season and have like a big positive impact in there, just because of ultimately the relationship with the pitchers is what's most important. And to acquire a catcher from outside the organization, they're not going to have those relationships whatsoever with your pitchers. It takes a while to like get that going. Not ideal to try to build those relationships in the middle of a playoff contending season like this one. Craig Mish echoed it during his spaces last night that if Sandy is the one that makes it pretty adamant that he doesn't need to be paired with Stallings anymore, then the Marlins would oblige him. And to this point, he just hasn't really been forceful about that. We'll see it again tonight. We'll see what impact Stallings has on both sides of the ball. We're really deep into the year, and it's been more of the same as we saw from last year, with the exception of Sandy himself not getting any sort of indirect benefit from working with him. And that was like the main asset that Stallings had in 2022. There's a lot of guys that would be upgrades over him. And it's just a question about, whether it's worth the trouble to make that change. And a lot of it goes back to Sandy, where it's not a coincidence that they've been working together exclusively the last year and a half. We would hope that you don't want to throw Stallings under the bus, but like his individual performance hasn't been like majorly calibered this year. And it seems to be the only thing that is really holding him in this position is that Sandy has so much comfort working with him. It's harder and harder to understand why there's that comfort between them when they're just not performing as a tandem so far this year. Yeah.
And I think with that will be a good time to go into our little break here by La Pop. But after this break, we're going to have so many topics for everybody. We'll see if we can even cover this in another half hour. We're going to talk about Sandy and his start tonight, looking at lineups, Jazz returning, and then we're going to have on the Futures game and talk a little Nasim Nunez and Patrick Monteverde, who were selected to the MLB Futures game. But stay tuned. We'll be right back after this break. And we are back. So first, let's maybe discuss this futures game. Then we could put Jazz, throw in Sandy, and the Boston series all almost into one topic. So let's go and talk a little bit about the MLB futures game. Nasim Nunez from AA Pensacola, along with his teammate Patrick Monteverde, have been selected to the MLB futures game. And this is, I believe, I think I tweeted out, the first time that the Marlins are having a position player in the futures game since 2019 when they had Isan Diaz, Monte Harrison, and just for fun, the pitcher selected for the Marlins that year was Sixto Sanchez. So that's definitely a trio right there for the Marlins. And for Nasim, that's a guy who's not going to hit for power at all. His power year is this season, which is just 4 home runs. But his big ability is his defense. I believe he came into the draft with 80 grade defense, 70 grade. It was definitely the highest shortstop, maybe defensive wise, in that draft class. And Nasim has just really been proving it on and on in the minor leagues. His OPS is just under 700, but with a guy who gives you such elite defense, if you can give him some more playing time to increase those numbers, you give him that chance. Eli, can you talk to me a little more about Nasim and maybe why he was selected compared to other guys?
Well, we got to talk about his base running as well. This year, 33 steals, by far the most in the Marlins org, but he's only been caught 3 times. This has now been a trend the last couple of years as well, where it's the volume and the efficiency, the base stealing. There's not a whole lot of others in the minor leagues, especially now in the Marlins system, that are as adept at stealing bases and changing the game the way that he does. His calling card offensively, aside from the steals, has been that he draws walks and he gets on base. And for somebody with his base running skills, drawing a walk is usually an automatic double because of how often he gets to seconds. He's a fun player to watch. I thought he improved a lot, especially last year from 2021 to 2022. And this year, he looks similar to how he was a year ago. An interesting wrinkle is that he's been playing some second base in addition to shortstop this year. And when he's been playing second, he's been fine. I feel like he's overqualified for second, and he's a surefire shortstop at the highest level someday. That being said, it's not like a super sexy pick. He's not like on par with a lot of these other players that are participating in the futures game just because of the really hard ceiling that's on his offense. The fact that this year he has a career high 4 home runs, and he had, it's only 4 home runs for an everyday player. And there's not much extra base hits outside of the homers either. That's been really confounding thing, is that the doubles aren't there. You'd think somebody like him would turn more singles into doubles. It's just that that's not the case. There's not a whole lot of quality line drives that come off his bat from either side of the plate. This is, it's not a super, let's not over exaggerate the importance of this selection with him. I don't want to put too much pressure on his shoulders just because he gets this honor. If this organization had any like really electric, well-rounded hitter to go into the futures game that's already at full season ball, they would do so. Among the players that are already at the higher levels, he was kind of among the ones that have also been healthy all year to this point. In the minors, he was a choice. I would just point out that somebody like Jacob Amaya, if there wasn't that room for him on the major league roster, and if he had been in the minors all throughout this first half of the season, I think Amaya would likely have gotten this ahead of Nasim if he hadn't been called up to the majors for the last couple of weeks. So it's fine, and there's still hope for him. Let's just not get too carried away.
Yeah. And with Pat Monteverde coming out of Texas, I believe he is 5 years. He is having a career year at AA Pensacola, 7-1. ERA, I believe, is 2.13. Is just having a really great year with Pensacola. I wish Alex Carver were here so he can give us a little more on them. But like I said, with Monteverde, 7-1, 2.13, 79 Ks in about 67 innings of work. With Pat Monteverde, I believe he's not even in the top 30 for the Marlins currently. And
if he's missing from somebody's top 30 list, then that reflects more on them than it does on him. Like, that's just pipeline being slow on updating this stuff. Yeah,
If you
Monteverde.
go look at Fish on Farms top 100. That would be a good one to look at.
Yeah, he's pretty safely in there. I think he's a strong likelihood of being either a starter or like a long relief type. He does it without much fastball velo. He throws even a little bit slower than Braxton does, but otherwise there are some similarities. I would say his fastball plays a little differently. He throws it up in the zone and gets a lot of whiffs on it, kind of like, if you could throw it back to Caleb Smith a few years ago, it's that same type of fastball as Caleb Smith had, and a similar type of build as well. And we know that with Caleb, he kind of faded pretty quickly after that one breakout year. But I think that's kind of an interesting comp for somebody like Monteverde long term, where he's kind of going to go back and forth between the rotation and long relief eventually. And that's good value for an 8th round pick and like a lowly regarded one. Nasim, we should point out, he signed a 7-figure signing bonus, over $1 million. He was the guy that you were kind of the baseline expectation is he would reach this level someday. And with Monteverde, he's more of an overachiever. Like, this is played out really well. And it's the reason why, among, at least here, he to me profiles as a pretty logical trade candidate, where he's not quite ready for the majors, but he's getting close. And it's an example of the Marlins turning a very low profile guy into a futures game selection. So he got it more on his performance this year. It's been amazing. ERA in the low 2s, pitching at AA, a lot of strikeouts. The peripherals look really good, keeping the ball in the ballpark. Yeah, just really good performance overall. You just think eventually in the majors, not a super sexy prospect, because the swing and miss is going to go down a lot as he faces guys that have quicker bat speed to catch up with his fastball.
Yeah, and with Monteverde, we were just mentioning Brax. So does he kind of maybe profile a little more Brax? I don't want to say maybe pitching wise, but as someone that, let's say they do trade Brax, knock on wood, maybe hopefully they don't, because he's been really great this season, that he could just step in to that role and maybe, I don't want to say maybe a 5th starter, but kind of like maybe what a Brian Hoeing is doing at all. Is that something that Monteverde could do? And maybe a second question on top of that, can he even debut this season?
The second one, I think, is easy. I think he could debut this season if things go pretty badly for Cueto, and or if Hoeing doesn't maintain this, and or if Edward Cabrera continues this to be out with injury, because he doesn't seem super close to returning at this time. Like, he could, I would say that there's close to a 50% chance that we see Monteverde in the majors this year if he stays with the team, though. I do think, I think for a team in playoff contention, he's not the type of pitch profile that I don't think you want to lean on him to fill a rotation spot for any considerable length of time right now. I think that would be pushing it a lot. I think that'd be irresponsible. So I would not be a fan of them trying that approach. I don't think Braxton has been even better than we could have thought, and I don't think Monteverde's ceiling is even quite that high. So it's a good season for him thus far, but I think he has more value as a trade chip than he does as part of a playoff team.
Okay. And probably the last question here before we get into the really juicy stuff with the series coming up in Boston, from our super subscriber here, Romeo, maybe why Victor Mesa wasn't in it. It could be the injury, a slump, but just do you think Victor Mesa would have gotten the nod? I believe he is the highest ranked position player, or one of the highest ranked position players in Pipeline and by our own Fish on the Farm.
Well, Romeo is bringing that up because he's done his own reporting on this. He was tuned into a Twitch stream from Dax Fulton. Dax Fulton had his surgery and he's bored out of his mind, so he's streaming like every single day on Twitch. And in the Twitch chat, Victor Mesa Jr. commented about his status. He's been playing. He suffered an injury a couple of weeks ago colliding with a wall, and he missed about 10 days after that. After that collision. And at the time, he was OPSing around 800. He was playing really great defense in center field. And I thought, just overall, having the stronger overall season than Nasim was, he came back. And since then, he hasn't really been performing much at all, like on either side of the ball. And he has this very honest comments in that Twitch stream about how he's still in pain and he's playing through some pain right now that is affecting him. So that raises concerns that an organization would have one of their better prospects playing through an injury instead of taking full time to heal it. He's only 21 years old. There's no reason to rush him through or endanger losing him as a center field option when that's so valuable. So I would just say that Victor Jr. overall was having the more impressive overall season than Nassim was until that injury. His slump since coming back from that injury kind of, in my opinion, took him out of that consideration. Otherwise, I would think that he'd be the slightly better fit for this game than even Nassim, just because of how he was doing more with the bat and more as a power hitter.
Yeah, really well said there, Eli. I do wish Carver were here, or maybe even Kevin to maybe give us more, because I know these are their guys. They love these guys. They're always on them. But to go from that, let's go ahead and talk about what people really came here to talk about. This upcoming series versus the Boston Red Sox. The Sox up in Fenway Park, a game that might get delayed because of the weather, but we still have to wait for Noah if we are going to get him on that. But this should be a very fun series for both sides, and including for the Marlins, we do get the return. I don't know if we have any video of Jazz doing anything to announce this, but Chisholm Jr. is back for the Fish and hitting cleanup. Yes, he's hitting fourth for the Marlins, coming back from the IL in turf toe. Nick, I want you to jump back in. What can we expect from Jazz? What do we think of Jazz returning and where he is placed in the lineup?
I mean, there's no question it's super exciting to have Jazz back, especially with knowing who he is with the Marlins. But I think the one scary thing is that they've done so good without him. It seems like on this long stretch of them doing really good, beating up on these somewhat not as good teams, but on this long stretch, it just seems like they've not missed him. That's the thing. It doesn't seem like they missed Jazz. So the thought would be, okay, him coming back in would really produce something big in the lineup. And I don't love the cleanup spot today. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I was expecting probably, I know they dropped Jesus Sanchez down, which is why Jazz is probably a little higher, I'm assuming. That's my thought about it. But that kind of makes it make more sense. But I'm really excited about it. You know what kind of flash he brings to the game. But also, Jonathan Davis has brought plenty of flash to the Marlins, plenty of excitement. So I don't think it should be exciting. I mean, hopefully now he can kind of get back on track, because obviously at the start of the year, we know he wasn't anywhere near where he wants to be. So hopefully he can, after this injury recovering, he can kind of get back on track to where he is. And hopefully, I know this tough stretch coming up, give the Marlins a really big spark during this stretch and push them along through these tough games and take a winning record throughout these games.
Yeah. With Jazz, this is a very divisive topic, I suppose, because of how well Jonathan Davis is hit. JD has a higher OPS than Jazz does this year, higher batting average than Jazz does in his limited sample, and I think a lower strikeout rate without double checking. Yeah, Jazz was striking out. I forgot how high that was. Jazz was striking out nearly 33% of the time before his injury. That's not playable, but he was trending in the right direction before his injury. He has a longer major league track record that says he is close to an average hitter overall, in addition to being a premium base runner. And the indications before his injury is that he was really figuring things out in center field. Not just his athleticism there, but also his reads on the ball and his first step. He was looking like a very legitimate, good defensive center fielder, exceeding the expectations that we had for him in spring training and early on in the year. And you add on top of that the power. There's just not that many guys in this lineup that have that type of power. We've seen it at times from Jesus Sanchez, but he's made this kind of conscious change to his game where he's de-emphasizing his power hitting, and he's kind of content with going the other way and hitting line drives. With Jorge Soler, obviously, he's been the one guy that really stands out in Jazz's absence, where he's on pace for 40 homers, and he does it in high leverage situations. He's been awesome. I just think Soler needs some help in this department from somebody like Jazz, so that this team isn't so reliant on singles. So they're not so reliant on contact. And there needs to be multiple ways for this Marlins offense to produce runs. We're coming off a series against the Pirates. Although it was a successful series, the offense did not look all that impressive in the majority of those games. They really gutted it out mainly because of their lack of slugging, because they just didn't have an easy ability to put crooked numbers on the board with a couple swings, and Jazz does that. As a base runner, he's as good as ever. He is really made out for this era of limited disengagements and the larger bases. I think this team has been missing the stolen bases in his absence. That's the one thing Jonathan Davis hasn't been doing. I think he's only had one steal over this entire stretch with him as a Marlin. This is a group of where it's not a super athletic group, and it's just not a super aggressive group either on the bases. That's another part of creating offense for yourself that Jazz does at a really high level. So the one concern I have about him, the ongoing concern, is that I don't think he can hit lefties. I don't think I don't think you can trust him even at this high in the lineup when he's facing is at a platoon disadvantage. And that's where Jonathan Davis comes in. I think he's a higher quality backup plan than any of the other guys that were on the roster early in the year. So I think Davis is still going to get his sporadic starts in center field. Jazz is playing basically every single day before his injury. And I think that will be a little bit different now moving forward, because if Davis keeps this up, using Jazz perhaps more often as a DH on certain days as a maintenance for his toe injury, I think this is really good news. I'm more excited about Jazz's return than I think most people are. More optimistic that it's going to make the team better, because Jazz is a good player for as flawed as he is. He has a combination of skills that nobody else on this roster has or is even close to. And that's going to, I think, make them a more complete overall team.
I think you're right with how much of a he gives them, especially electricity wise, kind of. Besides, there's no one on this. I mean, Soler hitting the long home runs gives kind of that spark, and Arise obviously being so high gives it. But Jazz, no matter what he's doing, being in the field, hitting, whenever he does something good, it just kind of, I feel like, gives that much more of a boost to the team, just with how fun he plays baseball and how fun he makes it look. I mean, he's one of the guys in the league. He's on the cover of the show and everything. He's one of those guys where just you watch him play baseball and it just seems like so much fun and electric to do. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited for him to come back tonight.
There we go. Along with Jazz returning, we are getting Sandy on the bump against the Boston Red Sox. And Sandy, it's just been completely different than what we've seen in 2022. Almost maybe the exact opposite from him. But what we've really been seeing recently is he has these slumps almost in the middle of an inning. He'll give up 4 runs in one inning, and then the rest of the way he reverts back the clock to 2022 Sandy, and it's like that never happened that inning. But the Marlins can't really come back when they're down maybe 5-6 runs in the second inning, third inning. It's really difficult just seeing that there from Sandy. And Eli, do you have, I don't want to say hope, but maybe what are your expectations from Sandy in Fenway?
Well, let me see if I can pull up the stat really quick from one of my favorite Twitter follows, Hot Whistle, about Sandy's particular issue, where it has really been, I think, luck continues to be such a big factor that is going against him, where it seems that so many bad things happen when there are runners on base. The batting average against him doubles, basically, when he's pitching with runners on base versus when he's pitching from the windup. And that is, it's unavoidable for somebody like him, because he has a league average strikeout rate, if not a little bit lower than that. There's going to be some runners on base at every time. And I don't think it's going to be possible for him to entirely put his first half struggles in the rear view unless he makes some sort of adjustment with runners on base. And I don't really think it's the pitch selection so much, but it does feel that's one thing that we're just trying to solve is, what it is that changes when there's runners on base, and why it is that allowing just one guy on sometimes opens up the floodgates for him. This is a pretty rough matchup against the Red Sox in this particular case, because this is they're not a super flashy team overall. And they don't have even like one individual offensive player that you completely fear, even with somebody like Rafael Devers having a down year. But most of their guys do get on base. As a team, they have a 332 OBP that is 4th in the American League, and I think it's comfortably top 10 in the majors. They do have a lot of different guys. I'd say Justin Turner almost as good as everybody else in their lineup that works these deep counts and just battles. It's going to be a fascinating matchup because Sandy, he continues to be really efficient with his plate appearances. Like he gets through with guys really quickly for better or worse. That allows him to still work deep into games and pitch innings. And this is a team in the Red Sox that works very deep counts. So it is a strength versus strength from that aspect. And I would kind of lean towards it not going super well for Sandy. I lean towards there being traffic on the bases. And what we've seen this year is whenever there is traffic on the bases, it leads to runs, usually multiple runs. So just looking at this Red Sox lineup tonight, it's pretty close to, it's not totally full strength. I don't know who David Hamilton is whatsoever. Their shortstop position has been a carousel, a total mess, but that's top 8, the top 7, I should say, in that lineup from Duran all the way through Kike Hernandez. That is a pesky lineup. Is a lineup that is, I think, really well suited to give Sandy some fits. Not a super strong base running group as a whole, but more so just getting on base in the first place. With Sandy and Stallings, this pairing, they can't control the running game against anybody. So even guys that aren't traditional base stealers take advantage of it. And now you're doing it in this unfamiliar. It's always really frustrating to pitch at Fenway Park as a visiting player because of all its weird quirks that go into it. And there's a reason why the Marlins have not won a game at Fenway Park since Kevin was born, 2009. Basically, not literally, but it's been 14 years since they've won a game at Fenway Park. It is a tough place to play for opponents. And so I would, in this series opener in particular, I have concerns from the Marlins perspective.
Yeah, and they are missing probably their best hitter right now, Masataka Yoshida. Does have, I believe, a soreness, so he is missing this game. That was one I was probably maybe more worried about for the Marlins, with the 838 OPS hitting basically 300 at 299. They are missing, I believe, Christian Arroyo also. So I believe for the Marlins, if they want to take advantage of the Red Sox and maybe what they're going through right now, it will definitely have to be this game with Sandy on the bump also. And a lot of guys also from the Red Sox have been struggling. You have like Tristan Casas, who's been struggling as of late, who's supposed to be a feature Marlin there. And then also you look at Kike Hernandez, who compared to last season, I believe that's a guy who could give you easily 25 home runs. And then you look at this one, everything is just down drastically for Hernandez. And then we have Adam Duvall, who since coming back from his injury 2 months ago, has just been on the decline. As of late, he's not that hot hitter that we saw early this season, thinking, oh my God, Adam Duvall might be an MVP candidate, to now where it's just, where Red Sox just getting what the Marlins know of Adam Duvall. Nick, when you look at that Red Sox lineup, are there any guys also that maybe catch your eye, maybe like a guy like Jaron Duran or anyone like that?
I think the lineup, as you were kind of just going over it as a whole, is what I'm scared of today, as we talk about how Sandy has kind of always had that one inning. And I think this lineup is super capable of forcing Sandy into one of those innings. You go through just the 1 through basically 7, all of them could just spark an inning, and it's hit after hit because the top 3 guys especially, all of them get on base plenty. So those 3 could just get on base, and Devers is always ready to hit a home run, especially in Fenway. It's against any pitcher, against anything. Devers, you said he was having an off year, which is, but Devers can easily hit a home run against anyone, any ballpark, versus a lefty versus a righty. So I know Devers is definitely who I'm scared of, because Devers is just always one of those guys. I think in the middle of the order, so wherever that one inning maybe even comes for Sandy, I think if Devers is in the middle of that, it's going to be a problem. But other than that, I don't think I'm too worried about that much with the Red Sox lineup. I know some of them have had a down year, but I think it'll be exciting and a good start for Sandy, hopefully, as long as he doesn't have that one inning. I think if someone gets on base, if he's able to shut it down right away, he'll be able to get through it. But if he's not, I think a big inning could definitely happen today.
Yeah, and with the Red Sox, we've seen just a lot of injuries and guys who are hurt who could potentially help the team. Saying their story after that huge contract with the Red Sox has not been the same player like he was with the Rockies. You have Eli's favorite player from the WBC, Yu Chang, also on the Red Sox, who is injured as well. And then, Eli, I wanted to get your thoughts on maybe the 2 first basemen that the Red Sox have who have been just in a slump. Almost it seems like the majority of their careers in the majors, and Bobby Dahlbeck and Tristan Casas, with the latter being implemented or rumors of being a Marlin last offseason. How have those two guys been, and maybe just with the Red Sox way of bringing up these young guys, and maybe they have not been exceeding expectations that they've had for them?
Yeah, well, Delbach stinks. I can't believe he's still like on their roster and they're still trying to win games with him. He is great power and basically nothing else, and he's so frustrating to watch defensively. He makes first base look a lot harder than it should be. I think Casas is in a different category. He's been playing a lot better as of late to get back to the player that he used to be. He's a low batting average guy, and he might, for a lot of his career, be a low batting average guy. But he is playing as well as he has at any point in his career over the last, 3 weeks or so? Yeah, an OPS over 900 over the last 3 weeks. Finally coming into his own, I think. Like, this would have been, if the Marlins had pulled the trigger on a big trade for Casas, imagine if they had traded from their starting pitching depth, even on top of Pablo, to get that done. And Casas had performed the way that he did early in the year when he was hitting 133 in April, and he was still under 200 deep into May. Like, that would have been a really rough introduction to his new team. And the Red Sox themselves, they have not had a whole lot of patience with him. There were moments early this year where they thought about maybe scaling back his role a little bit from being a true everyday guy to something less than that. But just in time, he has gone back on track. So I think he's still going to be a really good player, that he's going to get relatively close to the type of player he was projected to be originally, which is at least a league average first baseman overall, if not a little bit better than that. He's still a dangerous guy to face in here. As you see, he's not yet one of their overall WAR leaders. He's still digging out of that slow start. He is somebody to look at during this series, though. I think he is, at this moment, he's one of the more feared bats in their entire lineup. Even though he bats a little bit further down, and even though he has a shorter track record, he has gotten hot at the right time to potentially take out a lot of damage against this team that I don't know if he grew up rooting for the Marlins, but he is from South Florida.
Yeah, and maybe the last topic of discussion for this lineup of the Red Sox, I wanted to go ahead and talk about Justin Turner a bit and just how he's been for the Red Sox, because that was a guy that the Marlins, I believe, offered a contract to, and then he, I believe, took less money and just wanted to play for the Red Sox. I mean, when you look at that, like, everything's turned out. Red Sox are barely a 500 team, and the Marlins are second place in their division in the wild card spot. Nick, at the end of the day, would you have wanted Justin Turner on this team? Do you think he would have made a difference, and maybe how good he is playing almost to his age 40 season?
Oh, when you look at our third baseman right now and how Justin Turner's being, obviously there's a correct answer to that. And yeah, I would love Justin Turner right now over how Gene Segura's played, with no knock on him. But it's just Justin Turner's been really, really good for the Red Sox this year. You weren't expecting him to really go out there and hit 300, 310. He's an old guy. It's not who he is anymore. You're not going to expect that. But still, to hit 11 home runs for them. Shoot, he's got 4 stolen bases, which is kind of unexpected. But for him to go out there and be kind of that solid number 2 guy in the lineup to lead to Verdugo and Devers, it's just really huge for them to have that just middle spot in the lineup. A veteran guy, too, has a good eye, is smart. He's a smart baseball player to be able to sit there and be smart in the lineup, and a veteran guy at that top of the lineup is really good for the Red Sox to me.
Yeah. So that's what Justin Turner. Maybe another guy, Alex Verdugo, is having a really great season. I believe he leads the Red Sox in WAR, batting average. Maybe another guy there to look at. And maybe really quickly before we get into predictions, we do have to mention the other pitchers that the Marlins are charting out this series. You have Sandy. Tomorrow, I believe, is Braxton Garrett. And then we have Jesus Luzardo on Thursday. We do know everything about them. But Eli, what do you think about what the Reds are putting out there? Is anyone maybe you want to talk about? I know Brian Bale has been playing really well for the Red Sox as of late. I believe his ERA is 2 or maybe even under 2. Is that the guy maybe worth noting of this Red Sox rotation that the Marlins are facing?
Yeah, a lot of my the slim chances that I'm clinging to in our fantasy league kind of hinge on Brian Bayo being a stud the rest of the season. He's another young pitcher where I don't know exactly what his innings flexibility is going to be by the end of the year, but for the time being, he is their ace, Brian Bayo. He's going to pitch on Thursday. Really impressive overall guy where it's not all that different from somebody like Sandy, where he's got great velocity. He gets a lot of weak contact and he works relatively deep into games, even for a guy that is being handled so carefully the way that he is. Extremely impressive. One of the better homegrown Red Sox pitchers that they've had in a long, long time. So we'll see him then. And with Luzardo, you hope that his last start is the beginning of him really taking off. I think just on the previous stream that we expressed a little bit of concern about Luzardo and a little disappointment about him just being kind of an inconsistent starter to this point. But his last start against the Pirates was one of his best of the season. And to me, I circled him entering this year as the clear number 2 in this rotation behind Sandy. So this will be another big challenge for him. This is a big challenge for every starter in this rotation. But in his case, you just hope he steps up. He's going to be such a critical piece of them moving forward. I think his ceiling is even higher than somebody like Braxton Garrett. And to this point in the season, it has been a big surprise that Braxton has outpitched him by a little bit. You would hope on the best teams, you want there to be that type of friendly rivalry where guys compete against each other to perform as well as they possibly can and see themselves in that competition, that friendly competition to outdo one another. So you hope the rest of the season that Braxton and Luzardo have that type of relationship with each other to push themselves.
Yeah. So with that, I think it's a perfect time to go into our series predictions. So Eli, let's start it.
This is prediction time.
It's time.
And as always, here for prediction time, we will be getting to see who wins the series between the Marlins and the Red Sox. How many games could be either team, and MVP can be from either team hitter or a batter, as we are looking at some of our predictions there. We do have a lot of Jorge Soler. We have Garrett Cooper. We do have Justin Turner from Williams. Looks like Parlin's Mayoffs might have to change that. I don't know if you're watching this, but Masataka Yoshida is injured, might miss the rest of the series, might come back late. So you might want to change that one. Parlin's Mayoffs, but everything there looks like is something that could happen. Parker going with Adam Duvall and MDV going with Tristan Casas. So, Eli, do you want to start it off?
Sure. Let me just get the music queued up. Let's do it.
All right. First up, Eli.
I was going with the I am backing off of that a little bit. I think they take one game, but the Red Sox winning 2 out of 3 in this series. We touched on Justin Turner, man. He is still raking, even in his late 30s. I think Justin Turner is going to be the series MVP.
All right. So for me, I'm going to go the exact opposite of that. I think the Marlins continue to be hot. Sandy gets back in the groove, and Braxton Garrett's going to have another double-digit strikeout game. I do have the Marlins taking 2, and my MVP, Luis Arias. He is going to get a home run in Fenway Park. He will get that. Intern Nick.
No, I'm going to be super, super positive since Jazz is coming back. Give me a Marlins sweep and Jazz Chisholm as the MVP.
All right, perfect. Let's see what happens there with Jazz getting back. But as always, remember to be a super subscriber for the low price of $3 a month. Or you could put whatever amount you want, but $3 is the minimum amount that you could put for us. But as always, for myself, for Eli, for intern Nick, this has been FOF Live presented by La Pop. And always, go fish.